morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is often said that history belongs to those who write it. Eddie Cross is one of the MDC leaders who has been at the heart of the opposition for many, many years. What he's saying here in this video clip, I think there is a number of historic facts, but there are also a number of half-truths. And he left out a lot more. And in this discussion, we just want to pick a few things to highlight those points. Good evening, Benjamin.
Good evening to you, and good evening to our viewers.
Okay, let's listen to this video, and then we can discuss it.
The jock flew to Zimbabwe to see Mugabe. Mugabe, at that stage, was prepared to resign. But it was the jock, led by Emerson Monaga, who said to him, under no circumstances do you resign. We're going to fight back. That was Emerson. And the reason was, that if they had lost the election, if they'd allowed MDC government to take place, where would they have been? They'd be nowhere.
What were you going to do to them?
I don't think we would have been any retribution from us, not from Morgan. He wasn't that kind of man. But they would have lost power, privilege, big cars, money. I mean, look at it from their point of view. Don't just look at it from outside, and just criticize them for what they did. But that's what they did. The big problem for me was that our African leaders, not...
Before we go on to the next point there, I think that is a historic fact. Emerson did lead JOC, the Joint Operations Command, and they were the ones who were to stop ZEC declaring the results in 2008, and went on for 6 weeks to recount only 5 million votes, and then watered down Tsvangirai's win to force a runoff. That is a historic fact, Benjamin.
Yes, I agree with you. He himself, Emerson Mnangagwa, he was on record. I don't know which rally when he actually said that the likes of Didi Masintasa had run away and gone to his farm when Zanu PF was losing. When everybody heard that Zanu PF is losing the elections, and he was the only guy that was left, and how he held his ground. I mean, he said it with his own mouth, so that there is fact. I think we cannot dispute that part, that he played a major role in the rigging of that particular election.
The tragedy here for me is that this is the man who went on to become, and who is at the present moment, president of the country. Here is the man who admits that he blatantly rigged the election. He was at the heart of the wanton violence that followed the runoff that year, and has left Zanu PF deeply entrenched in power. I think this issue is really an important one, which most Zimbabweans should take very, very seriously. We have got a regime here that is so deeply entrenched in power that firmly believes that they have the divine right to rule the country. They will never, ever allow anybody else to win. And this is at the heart of our problem. No one has the divine right to rule. Everyone should have the right to a meaningful vote so that the government of the day should be a true reflection of the democratic will of the people. And I think this is where we are failing ourselves. If you have got an illegitimate government, the rest doesn't matter. You already have an illegitimate government. And what is more, one you cannot remove. Come the next election, it still wields that those undemocratic carte blanche powers to rig elections. I think Zanu PF rigged the elections last year, and as things stand right now, they are going to rig 2028 elections. And so the tragedy or tragic story continues. I think this to me is what is so heartbreaking.
You know, I agree with you. I mean, here we are, we have a person that, does not even, have, is not, let me say, is not shy to say it out loud that this is what I have done. Though it is illegal, though it is an infringement of human rights, right? An infringement on the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the one that he has sworn to uphold. Well, he wasn't president then, but as ministers, they swear to uphold, the Constitution. But here's somebody that basically, says it out loud that, I was the one that was left behind when everybody was running away. I think he was trying to create a picture to say, I'm the one that saved Zanu PF from total meltdown. I single-handedly did this myself. And we know how it all played out, after that particular election. A lot of people got displaced, a lot of people got injured, a lot of people died, a lot of people went into hiding. It was a mess until, even post the election, until SADC had to intervene. But for me is, we actually know what he is capable of. This is my point. We actually know what he is capable of. And I mean Mnangagwa, not Zanu PF. He can rig and say it out loud. And I think this is why he even sings it and says, in Shona, he says, Tichingo Tonga. That is exactly what he means. That absolutely, whether you have an election or not, we will rule. And we are failing to grasp that idea. That, whatever, even if we were to vote in numbers, even if we were to flood the ark, trying we will never win. Because the numbers, the election is not won in the ballot, it's actually won at ZEC. That is where the manipulation happens. So that if we manage to understand that part, I think we are part solving our problem, and then we will find the solution, and then we complete it.
Well, let's play the video clip a bit further.
One African leader raised a question on this, including Mbeki. Mbeki accepted it. Why did the ANC fight the MDC for the full 17 years before the change? Why did the ANC fight the MDC? Have you ever thought about that?
You were in the trenches.
You know
Give
why?
us- yeah, give us
You know why?
information.
When we nearly beat ZANU in 2000 and in 1980, sorry, 2000, in 2000, when we nearly beat them. Remember, they only won the election that year by three seats. And I believe that was crooked, just like the referendum was crooked. They still lost the referendum. Mbeki ordered a review of the implications of an MDC government in Zimbabwe on South Africa. And that review, led by the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in South Africa, came to the conclusion that if the MDC came to power in Zimbabwe, it would mean the ANC COSATU, the ANC COSATU alliance, would break down, and COSATU would become an independent entity and would actually fight the ANC in the next election. And you remember at that time, Lulu was the president in Brazil. And Lulu's background was a trade unionist. And his party was a leftist trade union structure. And he was talking to this COSATU and trying to persuade COSATU to go independent. And in the tripartite alliance, which is the ANC in South Africa, COSATU is the muscle, 4.8 million members. ANC only had 187,000. It was COSATU with the money. If COSATU had left the ANC and formed an independent party, the ANC would have been defeated. So what Mbeki said was, ZANU must remain in power in Zimbabwe, because if the MDC comes to power, the ANC itself will lose power in South Africa. Was he wrong? Let me tell you, the one thing about Mbeki, he's got some brains. I think he was one of the more effective South African presidents.
Well, okay, stop it there. I think the detail itself of, the ANC sending out an investigation on what would be the implication of ZANU MDC winning the elections, that is mere speculation. Well, for us, we don't know. It could be true. It could maybe it is not true. But there is some truth in that. There is no doubt that South Africa ANC government has been supporting Zanu PF for a long time. But I think what I wanted also to emphasize here is that while that has been the case, the truth of the matter is that MDC itself, even during the 2008 elections, when the vote was being counted, I remember then Archbishop Desmond Tutu coming out publicly and saying ZANU PF should declare the results when 2 days passed since the voting was done and ZANU PF was dragging its feet on announcing the result. It was none other than MDC leaders themselves. Mongan Tsvangirai came out in the public and said, oh, we have waited these years for free, fair, and incredible elections. We are not going to do anything. We'll wait. And he waited. And I think it was almost after a week that he finally was trying to rally people to protest that why is ZANU PF failing to declare the results. But that was too late. And that was not ANC doing. It was MDC's doing. That is the point I'm trying to make there.
Well, that part I am not really well versed with, but yes, I mean I agree. I mean it's evident when he says ANC. I would say all liberation movements across Southern Africa. I mean just recently we had ZANU, ANC, and their counterparts from I think Namibia and so forth go to the Victoria Falls to have meetings, and of late ANC had invited ZANU PF to come and help them in their campaign trail for this year's election. That just shows that they are in cahoots or they are in bed together. So that part I do understand. What I don't like about this whole argument is solely blaming others, and like it's as if they're washing their hands clean. And I don't believe that then MDC was completely blameless during, let me say their whole existence, until let's stop when Triple C came into play. Let's try and it's the same thing, but let's try and differentiate I think they were not spotless. They had their flaws, and it would be wrong to blame Sadak, to blame Mbeki, because Mbeki came through Sadak, and they agreed to this here. For me, they agreed to a GNU and the conditions. They could have simply just said no. It's not it's not proper. We don't want to agree. Let's negotiate again. They had that voice. But I think, it was more of, what are we standing to gain? The Zanu PF, characteristics manifested in them. Greed took over. That's how I see it. So they cannot go and wash themselves clean. I think we cannot let them off the hook that easy.
Well, in this particular case, also for the sake of the record, it should be pointed out that SADC election observers and the AU refused to acknowledge Zanu PF's claim that they'd won the 2008 runoff. And it was that rejection that pressured, as much as Mbeki himself maybe didn't want Zanu PF cornered into this global political agreement, which gave birth to the GNU. He had no choice but to go down that route. So yes, there were some African leaders who did refuse to rubber stamp the elections, the claim by Zanu PF that they'd won. But more significantly, during the GNU itself, as much as the GNU itself was not the ideal government of national unity, some people feel the distribution of some of the ministerial positions should have been better done and so forth. But what matters the most is that the ministerial positions the individual party or individual held was irrelevant in terms of implementing the reforms. And MDC had the opportunity to implement the reforms. And unfortunately, they took their eyes off the ball. They failed to implement even one token reform during the entire 5 years of the GNU. That point has got to be made and has got to be emphasized. And unfortunately, as far as I know, Eddie Cross has never ever acknowledged that they took their eyes off the ball on the implementation of the reforms. So his historic account of that period loses its significance, because you cannot talk of the GNU without pointing out that it was the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the reforms, and also that by then the GNU, it wasn't Mbeki who was president in South Africa. It was Zuma. And his representative, because South Africa was the SADC head in the GNU, being the guarantor of the government of the global political agreement. Credit where credit is due. Lindiwe Zulu did push MDC guys to implement the reforms to the point where Mugabe was annoyed by it. He ended up calling Lindiwe Zulu that street woman, because she was the one who was pushing MDC guys to implement reforms. So in that regard, ANC leaders did try their best to get Zanu PF MDC to implement reforms. And just before the close of the GNU in 2013, SADC leaders called Morgan Changirai and company. I don't know whether Eddie Cross did not attend that meeting in Maputo in June 2013. But MDC leaders were told, do not go into these elections without reforms. They didn't listen. And it would be absolutely unbelievable to say that Eddie Cross never heard about that SADC meeting or the advice that they were given. If we're going to talk about historic events, I think it is important that we should respect the historic facts and not try to rewrite history to suit oneself.
Yes, I agree with you there. That's exactly what I wanted to also point out, to the fact that, let us look at the positives that SADC then went and played, during, the GNU, by means of pushing and reminding, tapping MDC's shoulder at every point to say, the real mission of what we have created here is not about, feeding the people. It's not about, who gets what out of the spoils of sharing power. The main objective was to create a level playing field, such that going forward, we don't have to visit this Zimbabwe issue again. And for that, I don't think they have anybody to blame but, themselves, them as in MDC. They forgot the real mandate, just the same way they forgot what their name actually means, And we for that, we have to hold them also to account. So they cannot just wash their hands clean and start pointing to say it was Emerson that did this, and then it was Mbeki that came and he persuaded us, and ANC did this. What did you do, right? How is your involvement in this whole, saga? So that makes them equally accountable for the wars that we are facing right now. So I believe this, if the whole truth, if you look at it, truthfully, and you want to actually get the whole transparency of this whole the events prior today, right? Now let's look at prior today or prior last year, when we had our previous election, going back through the formation of MDC. What have they done that has positively impacted today? What are they planning to do going forward? I think those are the questions now that we must start answering, or start asking and them answering, and not just hiding behind and telling us false hopes, and we are up singing. I think that time has passed where we just listen to whoever stands up and tells us what we want to hear, and we start clapping hands, and life goes on. Unless we do that, I don't see us moving forward from where we are here. We are going to be stuck.
Okay, let's just play the intro of that video clip.
And he was right. We were a threat to the ANC. So what did they do? They fought us. During their diplomatic missions in the United Nations, the European Union, they fought us around the world, fought us specifically, okay? And when it came to them manipulating the elections here, 2002, 2000, we won 2000. I remember that 2005 election like it was yesterday. Remember our people queuing 3 kilometers long, queuing all night, and then eventually they just closed the ballot boxes, and we won that election. Morgan was elected president with more than a surplus of 400,000 votes against Mugabe. What did Mbeki, what did the South African government do? They simply said, Zanu PF has won. And we couldn't fight that. We underestimated the influence of South Africa in the struggle that we were engaged in.
Okay. I think it is unfortunate that we keep going back to this issue of rigged elections. The opportunity to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections was there during the GNU. MDC have never been honest about it, to admit that they took their eyes off the ball. And not only that, post the GNU, Zanu PF has taken full advantage of that. What Zanu PF learned during the GNU is MDC guys are corrupt and incompetent. Given the right bribe, they will participate in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. And that is exactly what these MDC guys have been doing. The 2013 elections, even with SADC telling them do not go into those elections, they ignored that advice and they went ahead and participated. Some of them admitted that it was a mistake. People like David Coulthard, they admitted that was a big mistake. But when they could not talk their fellow MDC friends to stop participating in these flawed elections, they joined in. And they've been participating in these flawed elections ever since. As long as MDC guys are prepared to participate in these flawed elections, con their supporters to participate, some of them are under the disguise that, no, we are going to win the elections. We have, like what Chamisa said last year, we've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, when he had not done any such thing. As long as this system continues, Zimbabwe has got absolutely no chance. At the present moment, we are heading for 2028 elections. Zanu PF is, of course, going to hold those elections without even one meaningful reform in place. And Triple C, such as it is now, has imploded since the last election. But nonetheless, there are a few groups who will coalesce and participate in those elections. Chamisa himself is hopping from one foot to another like a cat walking on hot bricks. He can't wait for 2028 elections. He intends to participate, and already some of his Chamisa Chete supporters are keen to participate. But if we participate in those elections without reforms, in our millions, will give that process legitimacy, and we'll be back to where we started, to where we are today. And this message has got to be rubbed in. And I don't know how many times that's got to be said, but so be it. If there's any chance of people understanding the sheer futility of participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, then that opportunity must be taken. Thank you very much, Benjamin. I don't know whether you want to give your closing remarks then.
In closing, I would say I would like to deal in numbers first. If Zanu PF can, move 400,000 people, that have voted for the opposition, if they can move that volume, 400,000, that's a lot of people, and to give you the actual figure, that was 73%. Mugabe is on record saying he won, Morgan Tsvangirai won by 73%. It was the slip of his tongue. He won by 73%. And they can slash 73% into the 40s. Surely, what would have changed in 2013 that they believed that Zanu PF was not going to do that? And then let's come forward 10 years up, 2023. What made us believe that Zanu PF was just going to miraculously stop rigging elections? I think the only logical explanation is our naivety. We thought it's now saying the Zanu PF, they have reformed themselves, they've stopped their bad ways, they're now good people. Just because it's election day. I think we are also to blame in believing, that going to elections, especially rigged elections, would be our solution or our way out. Let's vote in numbers. If they can move 400,000, Chamisa had 2 million. If we remove 400,000 out of his 2 million, that's a significant chunk. So that just goes to show that participating in rigged elections is madness, is nothing short of madness. If we are to continue doing this, going on forward, 2028 years, everybody, I can see everybody is gearing to go there. But let's stop. We still have time. Let's stop and think. What is the best foot forward? Not this, what we have been doing for all this time. It has proved futile over and over again. So with that, I leave the question, what is our best foot forward? And I would encourage everybody, that has joined us to leave comments and your own thoughts, not what somebody else has said, your own thoughts. Then at least we can have views and then discuss going forward. Thank you.
Before I close, I'll just read a comment from Henry Handa. He says, nothing new here. That's true. Zimbabwe has had rigged elections for the last 44 years. There's nothing new there. That is precisely the point. We are keep going over and over the same thing, repeating the same mistakes. And we need to point out those mistakes. And even if it means repeating that is a mistake, we should repeat saying that, if only to stop people making the same mistake again. Participating in flawed elections without meaningful reforms is sheer futility. It's folly. And we should not be conned into believing that the opposition have somehow come up with strategies of how to win rigged elections. That is just nonsense. None of their strategies have worked. And how long are we going to wait for these strategies? Let's do the right thing. Elections are a process governed by rules. If those who are supposed to participate in those elections are not respecting the rules, we have got every right to say, no, we must play to the rules. And the idea that we will just continue participating in an election process in which there is not even something as basic as a verified voters roll is nonsense. Thank you very much again, Benjamin, and to the listeners, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.